Fellow Ghanaians, a very good evening to all of you, and thank you so much for joining us here on Upfront on the JoyNews channel. It's a Wednesday evening, the 24th day of November 2021, and in Parliament today, Parliament is continuing the debate on the 2022 budget statement and economic policy of government, and the Member of Parliament for Drabuso and Ranking Member of the Health Committee, Kwabena Mintakano, he's been calling for a total investigation or auditing of the country's expenditure on COVID-19, something that has been supported by, the Health Minister, Kweku Agyeman. And of course, in Parliament also, we're told of, a private member's bill on professional legal education in Ghana. But our focus this evening is on the country's energy sector. And I'm sure even as I talk to you now, there's somebody complaining about, how his power supply, how he's been experiencing power outages. And there's somebody always complaining and asking the question, when shall we get out of this? Yes, we do know, like we have been told, we are not experiencing doom so because of our generating capacity. But the question is, what is the financial situation and the technical situation when it comes to Ghana's energy sector, particularly the power sector? Now, government owns document, that is the Energy Sector Recovery Program 2019, indicates that if care is not taken, by 2023, there will be an estimated or projected debt of $12 billion. Now, just pay attention, $12 billion in Ghana's power sector if we don't change how we're going. Now, $12 billion would amount to some 72 billion Ghana cedis or more. That means it is only 8 billion short of the projected 80 billion Ghana cedis in tax revenue for 2022. Give it a thought. All our taxes put together, 80 billion, and if we are not careful, by 2023, that is how much we'll be owing when it comes to Ghana's energy sector, particularly the power subsector. The question is, how did we get here? But what does it even mean for you and me? And how can we get out of it? That's the conversation we want to have this evening. Because while we may be enjoying power now, with some still having interrupted power supply, if we're not careful, by 2023 and after 2023, we may have to go back to the dreaded period of 2012 to 2016, which we all do not want to get back to. And so this evening, our conversation is aimed at first understanding the problems we are facing in that sector and also ensuring that we never get to go back again. My name is Winston Amwan. When we return after these messages, I'll be introducing my guest, and then we'll begin conversations here on Upfront on the JoyNews channel. Right, so welcome back, and thank you very much for staying with us here on Upfront on the JoyNews channel with me, Winston Amwan. And this evening, our focus is on Ghana's energy sector, as already stated, and we're privileged to be joined by Ishmael Ejekumhene, who's Executive Director of KITE. And in the course of this week, the Abeku Brew Hammond Memorial Foundation and KITE, in partnership with the Super Morning Show on Joy 99.7 FM, we've been having this conversation, and it's important we continue the conversation here. Ishmael, good evening, and thank you very much for joining us.
Good evening, Winfred. Winston, I've changed your name, right?
Don't worry. And we've also been joined by Kojo Poku, who's an energy analyst. Kojo Poku, good evening, and thank you very much for joining us.
Good evening, Winston. I hope everything is well with you.
Well, everything is well. It can always be better. But of course, this evening, our concern is on Ghana's energy sector, because based on the conversation we've had this morning, based on the conversation we've had this week, it's important we continue with the conversation in ensuring that we do not get to some of the states that we may get to if care is not taken. But let me start off with you, Ishmael, because I want us to understand something. I want us to understand what is the current state of the energy sector in Ghana.
So, good evening to your viewers. Winston, the current state in simple terms is that we are not sitting well. I mean, we are in deep trouble as far as the energy sector is concerned. The financials in the sector are not looking too good, and this is not anybody conducting any forensic audits. I mean, we may have had our own research, but this is the government itself telling us that our energy sector is not in a good state. And I heard you in your intro referring to the Energy Sector Recovery Program. And the first few lines in that document is that we are seeking to ensure the financial sustainability of the energy sector. So it's not in a good shape. And since that document was produced in 2019, I am not convinced that we've made significant progress towards averting some of the dangers that the government itself is raising, and the imminent dangers that we've seen and read in that document. So we're not in a good shape. Maybe your viewers may be wondering why we seem to be doing well as far as keeping the power on. It's in Ghana we have this saying, and I don't know whether it's global, polish on debt. When you have something that in the inside is not looking good, but you make it look good. Are
you suggesting that we've been pretending all this while?
Not pretending, but we are at the stage where we are looking for outlets to use the power that we have, which is also part of the problem. We have been in a state of abundance for the last couple of years. So in a sense, we have the power to supply. So even if we are not paying most of the bills, and even if we have some plans that we are not dispatching, everything appears to be normal, because as far as the customer is concerned, they are seeing some stability in their power supply. So when I say it's like polish on debt, we are not feeling the true situation of the sector, because it's like when you're running a business and you are indebted to so many people, and even if they allow you to continue in the business, it's only a matter of time that they will say that, look, if you don't pay me, I'm either pulling the plugs or something like that. So yes, the generators are available, but when they produce, we should be able to pay them. And we should be able to collect all the monies. We should be able to ensure that we don't waste the power that we have. We should be able to ensure that the people who are buying the power, they are able to make some businesses with the power, make some money with it to be able to pay. If people are unable to pay, then also you can have the power and nobody will use it. So the state is not what me or Kojopoku will be talking about this evening. It's the state as told by the government. And way back in 2019, I don't feel that we've made significant progress to avert some of the dangers that we set out to avert.
Let me get to Kojopoku, and because Ishmael makes the point about, because we have electricity and all, there's always that question as to how come we find ourselves in this situation, and how can I believe that we're in this situation when for some people they have uninterrupted power supply. So, tell us, when we say it is this bad, it doesn't seem to be telling on the ground, does it?
Well, it does. What my brother Ishmael is trying to use, the word is seemingly. I've always said that the light is seemingly on. And when your light is seemingly on, it gives you the impression that you have light, but really and truly you don't. The infrastructure in the sector is really deteriorated. There are instances where your light is on, but if you have any of these gadgets that tells you the voltage coming into your house, I have a generator that tells me what the mains coming in is. And sometimes the voltage is about 198, 196, instead of the 230 up to 220 that we are supposed to be having. So yeah, your light might be on, but there are problems in the background. Okay, most people are struggling to get high voltage. Most people are struggling with high voltage. Some people are struggling with low voltage. That is when the power is on. Then there are instances where we are saying that, look, we are just about staggering ourselves along because we are coming from an era where everybody now said, oh, we've solved doom-saw, there is excess capacity, and going forward, this is how we are supposed to procure power. But no real action on the ground. The day-to-day accumulation of debt has been going on since His Excellency John Dramani's time. Nobody has solved that problem. When Honorable Ejapu went to the vetting committee in 2017 and said, well, it doesn't cut it, and said all the American English, he didn't solve the problem. He left it. Then that 4 years is gone. We started a new administration, and nobody is really putting the hammer to the ground and saying, look, I need to stop the reoccurring of debt from today. I always use this analysis where you are hemorrhaging, okay? You can't resolve the hemorrhaging without stopping the bleeding. So unless we stop the bleeding, we can't resolve the problem. And so, unfortunately, we kept talking about, oh, the debt is 2.7. It was 2.7 2017. As I speak to you today, nobody knows what the energy sector debt is, because it's all shrouded in a bit of secrecy. We know TOR alone, year on year, ESLA is paying something like 300 million Ghana cedis every year through the ESLA account for TOR. And we know that other areas are basically not making money, and there are more debt are being accumulated. People talk of the cash waterfall. The cash waterfall only distributes what comes into the basket. This year, we're supposed to have a major review of energy tariff. And my brother Ishmael is on the board of the commission for the PLC. We haven't done that. So it tells you that there is slightly a problem underneath. And it might not, see, in terms of energy, the only time you see the problem is when everything is gone down. So the only time it's in our face problem is when the lights are off. So when the light is seemingly on, then we all think it's okay, but it's not. And that is some of the things that my brother Ishmael through Kite and the Brihamon Foundation is trying to highlight with this week. Let's not make it look like we are the ostriches of today. Put our head in the sand, but all is not well. It's not.
Kojo, I mean, you make a point. You say that, for instance, I mean, after everything, Bwetejako starts and they didn't really solve the problem. But the question is, I mean, how do you say they didn't solve it? I mean, when they didn't do anything about it, when they started the processes of reviewing the PPAs, they've gone ahead of cancelling 11 of them, which we didn't need. So if they've reviewed the power purchasing agreements and have decided to terminate 11 of those, which we're told that if we had allowed them to go on, we'll be having to pay $586 million annually, but in cancelling them, we had to pay $402 million. Isn't that something?
Well, yes, it is something. We are not saying that they've done nothing at all. You know, the document you refer to, which is the Energy Sector Recovery Program, nobody will say that they've done nothing. They've done something, but the hard decisions have not been made. As we explained this morning, the policy document of take or pay into take and pay, that has still not been resolved. And that is major. People with contracts today have to convert that contract from a guarantee to a no guarantee. No decision has been made. Prepaid meters in all ministry departments and agencies, that has not been done. You go to the barracks, the military, the police, all the barracks don't have prepaid meters. Okay. The ministries and the departments, we are told, are supposed to go solar. That has not been done. Okay. So what I'm saying is that people are talking, something is being done, but the hard decisions are not being taken.
Okay. And staying with the hard decisions, it's important we understand how we got here. You started by talking about some of them. Let me get to you, Ishmael, so we understand. How did we get into our current situation?
Okay, so because Kojo decided to blow my top here with the PRC thing, he's blown my cover and I'm on live television. But let me just quickly respond to that. I mean, the board wasn't in place until 2 weeks ago. You know, the old board was dissolved in January. I mean, we stood dissolved until 2 weeks ago when the new board was in place. So it wasn't for us as commissioners. We barely 2 weeks into the office and we're now scrutinizing the document. So we know, and it's part of the problem. The part of the solution is making sure that the tariffs are announced timeously, and we make sure that there are no under recovery. So I believe that's what the board is going to do, having looked at all the numbers, and they will take a decision. But how we got here, Winston, it's a combination of many things, but I can summarize it into two.
Okay.
Years of underinvestments and under recovery when we make those investments, and allowing inefficiencies to fester to the point that by the time we decided to act, we were saddled with what we are now calling legacy debt. The legacy debt, as a result of bad decisions that were taken in the past, where whether it was TOR, whether it was ECG, nobody seriously stopped, or we weren't able to stop the hemorrhaging that Kojo talked about. So up until the point where we all realized, it led to the situation where, so the first thing is bad decision. The second thing is our inability to plan or inability to implement the plans that we put in place. So that led to the situation where we found ourselves in serious doomsday, and everybody was so angry about the situation that we decided to solve the problem. In attempting to solve the problem, we ended up over contracting the generation capacity at the time. We can't complain as a country when we have sufficient generation capacity, but when you have it and you don't need it, or you don't have enough demand for it, maybe you contracted based on some projections which never worked, because part of the vision at the time was that Ghana was going to become a net exporter of electricity. And Kojo said it, and we all know that when you have something to sell and you want somebody to buy, it has to be affordable. When you procure the plant and it's expensive and the person can get an alternative somewhere, it's a non-starter. So years of bad decision or lack of courage to take some bold decisions in the past took us to a situation where 2012, 2013, right up to early 2016, we were in serious crisis. And our attempt to correct the crisis led to a situation where we found ourselves suddenly with excess capacity that were all take or pay contracts. So most of the plants were either being under dispatched, or some of them were simply sitting down. They were not being they were idle plants. And because we have an agreement with them, when the plants are not running, we have to pay what we call capacity charges, the cost that the IPPs need to recover so as to be able to pay for the loans that they have taken. So because the contracts kick in as soon as they declare what they call availability. So they call Greco and say, look, today or for the rest of the year, we are available, and tell us when you want us to come on. They can start invoicing us. That's what they've been doing. So the legacy debt, the line was drawn as at the end of 2017, 2018, when this ESRP was being prepared. That was a $2.7 billion US, which was the total net debt indebtedness of the sector. And then there was a projection that the annual shortfall from 2019, 2020 up to 2023 could rise up to the $12 billion that you were talking about. Mm-hmm. And in order to prevent that from happening, we needed to stop the hemorrhaging that Kojo said. And the hemorrhaging, we haven't been able to stop it because the negotiations that would have taken us to the point that says that, the IPPs have agreed to either reduce their capacity charges, or they've agreed to change the arrangement from what the Minister of Finance said. We're going to move from take or pay or to take and pay, which we weren't too sure how that was going to happen, because you were, like I just said, you were changing the terms of the agreement, and those were the terms that the people have used to procure the capital. So we as a result of the years of all the problems that took us to the doomsday, and our attempt to solving the problem led us to where we are. We haven't been able to stop the hemorrhaging because the take-or-pay contracts are still running, and the people keep submitting invoices to ECG. Some have agreed to reduce the capacity charges as a result of the negotiation, but most of these things, before they come into effect, it will have to receive some approval, including parliamentary approval. And as we speak right now, we haven't heard that there has been any of the PPAs that have been renegotiated and has received parliamentary approval. So what it means is that up until the time that approval is given and the PPAs have been renegotiated, the hemorrhaging continues. And then we have all the inefficiencies, technical and non-technical losses. They haven't improved. As a matter of fact, even the 21% that was the regulatory benchmark, the total technical and commercial losses, the 21%, which many sector industry players think is generous, the distribution utilities and even the transmission utilities, they still are unable to do the 21%. So they are exceeding the 21%. In some cases, some are doing as high as 26%. And then you have the transmission utility also incurring all these losses. So the problems and the solutions, the roadmap that the ESRP said we were going to, remind you, there was a time frame that this needed to happen. I mean, the plan was supposed to have ended in 2023, and there were specific milestones that needed to be met. Nobody can say, like I just said, nobody can say nothing has happened. There is a whole unit within Ministry of Finance renegotiating the PPAs. We do have some. I mean, you remember part of the solution was on the distribution side. To say that we wanted the private sector concessionaire to come in, and that was what led to the PDS people coming in. And so if you look at the ESRP, the assumption was that PDS was going to be part of the solution. And now PDS, we all know what happened. The story is so what the PDS and all the strengthening that needed to come at the distribution side, that we need to figure out how we will be able to address that problem now that the PDS people never stayed to do what they were expected to do. So that's what has led us to where we are now. Okay. And unfortunately, 2 years down the line, we still haven't been able to implement even the phase 1 activities, let alone complete the phase 2 activities that would have moved us to the point where we would have avoided some of the bleeding that we wanted to stop, so that by 2023 we would have hit what we call the balance in the sector that would have ensured the financial sustainability.
So let me find out from you, Kojo. I mean, Ishmael has painted the picture. He's told us where we find ourselves now, what may have caused all of these. But for that person watching us this evening, the question is, what are the implications? How does the current situation affect me today or likely to affect me tomorrow?
Okay, so you remember we talked of private sector participation in the sector, in the energy sector, in the power sector.
Yeah.
And it was so important that we took it to the Millennium Development Authority for them to now co-partner us to do the Compact 2. Now, PDS came around, they couldn't do what they were supposed to do, and PDS was abrogated. Now, for some reason, somebody thinks that $600 million within 5 years that was to be invested is no longer necessary, which is shocking, okay? Because we all agreed as a country, the technical people, the experts sat down and said, look, we need $100 million investment in the energy sector every year for 5 years. Then the Americans were going to partner us on that so that the total investment in the sector will be $1 billion over 5 years. Some of the money came in early, which is the Pokuase bulk station that recently was commissioned. So some work was done. Okay, so about $300 million was spent. But all of a sudden, everybody seems to think that the $700 million that did not go to the infrastructure is no longer necessary. 21% of our energy generated, transmission, not even transmission losses, distribution losses, both technical and commercial, is now over 30%. The benchmark in PLC's calculation is 21%. It has climbed up to 30%. So now not only are we losing 21%, which we wanted to reduce further with this investment, every 1,000 cedis of electricity generated, 300 cedis of it is lost just because of bad infrastructure, old infrastructure, okay? The length with which we are transporting these powers, that is only in the transmission sector. Then in the distribution, that's only in the distribution center. Then the transmission also has their losses, which is about 7%.
Okay.
So if you have to add the transmission losses, the distribution losses, the number is scary. We cannot continue like that. And
so what are the what are the implications? So all the things that you've talked about for the end user, for the consumer, what are the implications in the short to medium term?
It's a high cost of electricity. It's a high cost of electricity because what is being wasted is factored into the price that we pay. So if the investment was made, the consumer will get reliable power and affordable power. Without the investment, consumer will continue getting 198 voltage instead of the 230 voltage or 240 voltage. Consumer will still pay high prices because the investment is not there and the losses are high, so it is factored. That is the problem. So government needs to come back to the table and take the PSP seriously. It cannot be business as usual, and 2 years down the line, everybody is looking away
you still want
nothing to see.
You still want private sector participation in our power sector?
It's non-negotiable. It's something that is non-negotiable. Private sector participation in the distribution end of our power sector is non-negotiable.
Why is that non-negotiable?
Because you need $600 million. Where are you going to find that money from?
Tell me.
You need 600. We need now we need more than 600. 3 years ago, we needed 600. I would say now we need more than 600 million. Where are you going to find that money from? Government doesn't have it. Government doesn't have money, so he's taking out Momo tax. So government sure doesn't have money to fix the infrastructure problems. You understand? So we need 600 million. So you need the private sector.
But the Momo tax is not going into the power sector.
I never said that. But are you trying?
Well, he says because government. He says because we don't have money. Because we don't have money, that's why we're doing that. But I'll get to you, Ishmael, shortly.
We don't have money.
I see you smiling. Yes, could you go ahead? Okay. Okay.
No, but I think the point that Kojo is making is valid. The only reason why when we started the Compact 2, we said that let's focus on the distribution segment of the value chain, was that recognition that things ought to change as far as that segment was concerned. And there was that realization that government was no longer in the position to make those investments. Mind you, ECG, NEDCO are all government-owned utilities, public sector utilities. Even if they decide to go and borrow, when they borrow the money, invariably it's the government that ends up paying the loan. So most of the time when we talk about the fact that the government are not paying the MDA bills, sometimes government, the only explanation they will give on the quiet is that, but we've taken all of these loans off your books and we are the ones servicing the loans. So the truth of the matter was that it was clear that we weren't going to be able to make those investments. So like the producer said, PDS or the private sector was to have invested a minimum of $500 million over 5 years. And mind you, that wasn't all the investment that we needed. In fact, if we want to make our grid network smarter and make sure that we are super efficient, a lot more money, there is a direct correlation between the investments we make and the savings and the losses, how we can reduce those losses. Even with the $500 million that PDS promised, every 100 million was going to translate to maximum 1 percentage point reduction in the loss. Those were the targets that they were committing to. So it tells you the amount of money we need. So I wouldn't even say that we need, by all means, we need a PSP, but we need investment in the distribution sector.
And talking about that investment, Ishmael, that investment based on investments within the sector, are you convinced? Do you, believe that we would have that kind of investment from the government?
No, we wouldn't. The government, like Kojo said, the government doesn't have the money. So, I'm sure if they had it, they wouldn't have agreed.
If government doesn't have the money, then it means we should be looking for private sector participation, or we should be paying more tariffs to be able to take care of that. Is that what you're suggesting?
Okay, so you know, in the tariffs, the bit that is supposed to go and replace the assets, it's the what we converted into the lease payment. So that's the capital recovery. Okay, those monies, I don't believe over time they are being kept to replace anything. Okay, so that money simply doesn't exist. That money simply doesn't exist. And the government is also not in the position. Mind you, all the power sector investments in this country, most of them were funded with...
Ishmael, hold on 1 minute. What was supposed to be the use of that money?
Okay, so in the tariffs, obviously, the utilities are given the bit of the tariff is supposed to be like for capital recovery, returns on their assets, and things like that. Those monies technically were supposed to have gone into some fund that when you have to replace some assets, you would have fallen on that money. Whether or not those monies, one, they are not able to collect all the monies. And if they are not able to collect all the monies, it means that they would not be able to account for all their monies that they're supposed to collect.
But they should be able to account for the money. I mean, these are monies that are... these are monies that are meant to be used in replacing assets. And so if the money is supposed to be used in replacing assets, we should be able to account for the money and be able to indicate what assets we have used these funds in replacing.
Okay, so that's another question that the utilities will have to explain. But you see, when you have a situation where apart from the technical and commercial losses, they are unable to collect the 70%, they are not able to collect all of that. The regulatory benchmark says that they are to collect minimum 98% of that. Any other failure to collect that means that they are beyond the 21%, we're still losing some money because you and I and most people are not paying their tariffs and their utility bills. So the truth of the matter is that if you look at the audited account of the utilities, they don't have that money sitting anywhere. But this is not yesterday's problem. That's why I said inefficiencies in the past and bad decisions in the past, they brought us where we are today. But the reality of the fact of the matter is that we need to improve upon the infrastructure and the distribution network. And that was why the PSP had to come into effect. And once there's no PDS, then if we haven't gone back to any PSP, then we need to figure out where that money is going to come from. When the PDS deal was put in place, there was suggestion that we should float ECG shares on the stock market. Is it something that we want to look at that and say that we are selling shares in ECG? Is ECG worth that much so that we'll be able to raise sufficient money? If not, then unless we borrow, then we have to bring in a private sector who will invest, and they are not for the Christmas. They will have to make margins on their investment.
Now, let me bring in Kojo at this point. Kojo, I mean, we're talking about the implications. We have talked about the tariffs. But let's look at government's own attempt to solving this, or government's own understanding of the issue. And the economists will say a problem well defined is half solved. So we seem to have defined the problem very well. Based on our understanding of the problem, what were the measures we outlined in solving these problems? Kojo, I think you'd have to unmute your microphone. We can't hear you.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, it's better now.
Sorry, I think it's about investment. Let me make one quick correction. Your platform is a very powerful platform. One of my big men is watching, and he's asked that we correct the losses on the transmission. It's not 7%. Its benchmark is 4%, but they are doing 5.1% on the transmission losses. Okay, so it's 5.1%, not 7%. So I thought the big man will be happy now that I've corrected it. But anyway, what we need to do, look, bottom line is money and forward planning. Like I said earlier, by the time the problem is glaring in your face, then the problem is here. Electricity is such that if you don't fix it, it will turn itself off. So we now keep getting these breakages in the transmission lines. We keep getting these trips. We keep getting these overloading of the transformers. When the machine is old, it's machine. So it will shut itself off. And unfortunately, electricity is such that by the time it shuts itself off, if we are not careful, like what happened in March this year, the whole nation, almost the whole nation went off because of one little problem that occurred somewhere. So it is dire. That is why forward thinking and forward planning is the way to go. And money, investments, look, the grid core issue beginning of this year. If you read every single document in the energy sector, every single document from the Ministry of Finance, they knew about the grid core problems 3-4 years ago. Okay, the Kumasi Kintampo, the Volta region, Malam, and all these lines that were to be done, but the money was not there. The agency in France that was supposed to give them money, the money was withheld because Gridco's books were not good. They keep asking government for money. Government was not making the money available. So it's not that we don't know about these problems. Currently, as we speak, there is a problem in Kumasi. Okay, for the last 2 weeks, Ashanti region is in darkness. There was a line, one of the transmission lines, 161 kV lines, that real power to Ashanti region, a mask fell on it. Okay, now for 2 weeks, it has not been resolved. For all you know, there isn't enough resources to get the job going. Okay, maybe a contractor can be mobilized because Gridco doesn't have the requisite money. So I have advocated that government should come up with a certain amount of money, which is paid on the side for energy sector infrastructure. Because Ghana is not going to expire tomorrow. In 2050, our population is going to be about 50 million.
Are you calling for the introduction of a tax or levy? Are you calling for the introduction of a tax?
Well, I'm calling for government to put money aside.
Where is government going to get that money from? There's a Delta Fund.
Listen, let's not listen. All I'm saying is that I'm advocating for government to make
this advocacy. Yes, but this advocacy is something we need to, interrogate a bit. There is a Delta Fund. Okay, so in petroleum, we've introduced a 20 pesos, which is supposed to go in, helping us defray some of the costs associated with take or pay. Now, that from the first to third quarter, we're told has generated some 266 million Ghana cedis. Which other fund are you talking about, Kojo?
Okay, so now let me explain. The ESLA and most of the energy sector recovery monies that are there are to defray legacy debt.
Yes.
After the legacy debt has been defrayed, the money keeps coming in. So I'm not saying that new levies or taxes are to be introduced. What I'm saying is that Ministry of Finance should target some money to be put aside for energy sector infrastructure. Whether be it, look, we have not been paying the toll debt recovery, okay? We pay, but they don't pay the people. So year on year, forex translation and interest on the debt keep piling up, and we keep paying $50 million, which is about 300 million Ghana cedis every year as toll debt, okay? Why can't we just pay off that debt so that we don't have to be paying the interest and every year reoccurring? When those debts are paid, Ghanaians are still paying these levies and funds. So we can make some money available for the energy sector infrastructure. Look, if we do not do that, we're going to get to a point where we need to find the money to do it. So
but you know, Kojo, unfortunately, when we went for bonds using ESLA, when we went for tax anticipated loans or bonds for that reason, we used that to, pay legacy debts or the banking sector. Now it'll be a bit difficult to go back in there. Where are we going to look next? What else can we do under the circumstances?
Ishmael, are you going to say something?
Okay, so Winston, you see how complicated the problem we have on our hands. Okay, so before we even start introducing new recommendations, okay, why don't we ask ourselves that if we had even managed to have implemented the ESRP, which is a fantastic document, whether we wouldn't have been in a much sounder position by now, because there were specific interventions that were supposed to put in place. But the fact of the matter is that we definitely need to invest in the energy sector, especially the power sector. There are one of the things that we haven't spoken about now is the fact that there is also excess gas that we are paying for.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's only because we had a bigger vision. We thought that we're going to have all these power plants that we're going to run on gas. So we've contracted over 800 million scarf of gas every year when the demand is around 350, 400. So, and those monies are being paid. You talked about a Delta Fund and all of that. Those monies, when they come, because they can't pay for everything, they are paying for some of the debt. Okay. So in terms of going forward and the investment that we need, how do we invest in the sector? Either you're saying that the sector is good enough that the private sector is interested in coming in and putting their money. As for private capital, they go where the returns are good. I mean, they will always go where the returns are good. That's how come you have people investing in very, very difficult terrains, countries where there is civil war, they will still put their money there because the returns are good. Either we make the sector ready and very, very attractive for private sector to come in, and then we pay attention to what they can take out of or get out of it, and we have our system well developed so that we have reliable power. Or like Kojo is saying, and like we've done in the past, let's see how we can have a plan and say that this is how we want to, what the amount of money we need in the power sector. Let's see how we're going to build the fund. There's Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund. Okay, there's an existing fund. Part of the oil money is supposed to go in there. Can we find a way of channeling some money there so that even if we have to bring in some people, we can also put our equity or something like that in there, or find something to leverage, and so that we get the private sector to come in and do that. Alternatively, I mean, and that's investment for the future. Well, I mean, we need very soon what we call an excess capacity will no longer be there. And if we don't start planning from tomorrow or from yesterday, we'll find ourselves in a situation where all of a sudden we're saying that we have generation shortfall. So that one, we don't need to find money ourselves, because the private sector will come and do it if only we guarantee that we're going to pay them. To be able to pay them, that's why we said that the people who are supposed to be collecting the money on our behalf, because every investment in the sector, the one who is collecting the money most of the time are the distribution utilities. That's how come we say, well, let's focus on them and make sure that their collection rate, everything is efficient, so that we don't lose power and we'll be able to pay for that. So we know the solutions, and I believe that the ESRP is a good document. Let's rather be asking those questions, that what are the bottlenecks? What are the things that are preventing us from, meeting those timelines that will allow us to ultimately solve the problem? Because the ESRP was also supposed to make the sector look good, in the sense that if we are balancing the books and we are paying all the annual shortfalls. I mean, the IMF said, whether the government has told us or not, the IMF said that last year we paid close to $2 billion to close the sector shortfall. That was equivalent to about 1.5 or so of our GDP. That's what is going to happen. At the end of 2021, we still need to find those monies to pay. Meanwhile, the MDA debts and all of those things are there. Let's take the hard decisions that will allow us to even implement the ESRP, even if it means prolonging the plan till maybe another year or so. Let's get the sector ready for the private sector to be able to be interested, or for investors to be able to come in. There are several ways in which we can attract private capital. Let's make the sector interesting enough and sound enough for people to want to bring their money into the sector.
Yes, let me get to you, Kojo. Yes, Kojo, at this point, because Ishmael introduces the excess capacity, this whole conversation about it, the take or pay. And we know that there were a lot of plans that government had. The public, the Power Purchasing Agreement Review Committee made some recommendations. What's become of those recommendations? What's become of all this excess capacity conversation and our take or pay dilemma?
Political will. I've always said that sometimes the political will is not there to do what is right. Ishmael introduced gas. We are doing take or pay for E&I gas. At the same time, we have gas from the 10 fields and Jubilee fields, which are free, okay? But we are saddled with take or pay gas from E&I. At the same time, you have Tema LNG, okay? Now, we have gas that we don't even take. We are re-injecting it back into the oil fields. Then somebody go and sign, GMPC signs Tema LNG. And Tema LNG, if it's to take off, it's take or pay. Okay? So the LNG, the gas price is expensive. It's more expensive than the gas we're producing locally. So GMPC have signed on to Tema LNG to bring that in. So the problem is politically made because there was no reason for Tema LNG to continue after 2017. There was no reason. Okay? Tema LNG should have been shut down. But government went ahead and did Tema LNG. Now the plant sits there, and if they bring the gas in, we have to take it and pay for it. GMPC have to take it anyway. So I would say we, because GMPC is us. Now let's go on to the decision of whether government really did the hard decisions in terms of abrogation. They did not. Look, there's another company, AXA. Okay? If you look at how much government has paid AXA to date, and how much government was to pay AXA in 27 for them to go, you'll be surprised. Okay? They were supposed to be paid 1/4, less than 1/4 of how much we pay them now in 2017 as a get out of jail clause in their agreement to say, look, it's an HFO plant. We no longer need this plant. Let's cancel it. Let's abrogate it. Pay the cost involved. Let them go. We would have saved tons of money. We have not done that. And from 2017 till now, these huge monies that Ministry of Finance comes and tell us that they are paying for excess capacity, AXA is being paid. So the problem is the political will to do the right thing. Every now and then, somebody will go and lobby why something should not be done. A typical example, our upstream, okay? The blocks in our upstream. A lot of these blocks were given in 2013, 2014. Almost all of them have gone past their time, their first phase time. They are supposed to be abrogated. 2017, most of them were not abrogated. As far back as 2016, when we were about to have election, 2020, when we were about to have election this last year, there was a forum in Alisa Hotel, and Mr. Ebed Febo from Petroleum Commission came and started using COVID as an excuse for some of these oil companies not doing their work on the offshore Ghana. But these blocks should have been abrogated in 2017 because for 5 years this government has been, those companies have not done any exploration work. Again, political will to do what is right. Okay, so and we keep being told that if we are not careful, our upstream will dry up. Yes, it will dry up because there's no activity. GMPC talks of energy transition, we need to do it ourselves. There are companies prepared to come to Ghana today to do exploration work. But some people have taken the block and not doing the work, and there's no political will to abrogate those blocks. That's the reason.
So, Ishmael, I mean, let's look at it again. We gave ourselves up to 2023, and we are in 2021. We have 2 years to go. Based on the activities that we've been able to implement, would you say we'd be able to implement the energy sector recovery program by end of 2023?
No, I doubt. I think we need a few more years, but we need to pick, the pace will have to pick up. I'm hoping that the Project Light, which is the entity that is renegotiating most of these PPAs, will be able to bring a few of these renegotiated PPAs with demonstrable savings very quickly to stop the hemorrhaging that we talked about. Power plants that will have to switch to gas, we have to fast track that so that the excess gas will be recovered. We need to, even before we're able to make some significant investment, we need to be able to insist that the commercial losses, which is a component of the losses that is entirely within the distribution utilities' power to do something about, we need to make sure that we start tightening even the regulatory benchmark if it's possible, so that the utilities will be able to cut down on their losses. There are some of the immediate steps. The phase one activities will have to be that are still outstanding will have to be very quickly cleared. We wouldn't be able to meet the 2023 deadline, which means that whatever new time frame that we're looking at, we have to make sure that we pick up pace and not allow. The scary part is the fact that the longer we take to renegotiate these agreements, the debt profile will still be going up. And ultimately, nobody pays for it. We are going to pay for it, whether it's whichever form of levy or whichever form of taxation. Or the worst case scenario is that the sector goes back to doom so, and then everybody is sitting down not knowing what to do. So where we are at today, if you take stock, we probably are behind, and it means that the 2023 deadline is not feasible. But what is lurking in the background is what Kojo talked about, the fact that very soon and sooner than we expected, the excess capacity will disappear. And that would mean that if we don't start, now we say we're going to go for tendering, nobody is going to be able to do any unsolicited proposal. So I think we should have the roadmap in place to start thinking about when to contract additional capacity. And if we are not in a crisis, I believe we're in a much better position to negotiate those PPAs better than we did when we contracted those plans when we're in crisis. And I mean, I said it in the morning, I believe no leader would want to take Ghana back into doom. So what we saw those years, I don't think I want to ever witness that again in my lifetime. But if we keep doing the same thing as we did, then we may find ourselves in that situation. Unfortunately, it's no longer us alone, but now there is a private sector involved, and they are not as forgiving as the public sector can forgive some of the things. The private sector ultimately would want to take their money. So let's hurry up. Let's keep reminding the government that we believe that the roadmap they themselves drew is capable of taking us out of the woods. And if we check what the bottlenecks are, we should be able to implement that strategy that will take us closer to the financial sustainability.
Well, that's all time would allow us, unfortunately. Kojo, I give you the final bit. That's all time would allow us. If we're not going to be able to finish phase 1 and 2, I'm sure there's no need talking about phase 3 by end of 2023. Oh, I think you've muted your microphone, Kojo. Can you just unmute it for us? And then in 30 seconds.
My mic is on.
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, so I'm saying that for me, I held the view that the energy sector, the power sector on its own need a very big focus. So we're advocating that the ministry were to be split. I think that there is a lot more that needs to be done in that sector. Combining it with oil and gas basically doesn't make the minister focus, and there is a need to have somebody who stays on the power sector to make sure that the problem is resolved. If not, look, we are going to get back to a situation where that it will be too late to do anything about it.
Thank you very much, Kojo Poku and Ishmael Ejekumheni, for joining us here on Upfront on the Joy News channel. My name is Winston. I'm on behalf of the team. We're grateful that you made time to join us. Catch me tomorrow on the Super Morning Show from 5:50 a.m. to 10 a.m. Have a lovely evening and keep watching the Joy News channel.